Graduation Saturday night, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I couldn't see where the board was sitting, so
We
I
had
couldn't-
front row.
Yeah, but on
Which
the,
we did.
was it on the left?
Yes.
Or right coming in?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so I was on the other side, so I couldn't see
Oh, got you.
who showed up.
Yep.
And I
I
came
did,
in late.
yeah, Diane was
well,
there,
not
Megan
late,
was
on
there,
time,
I saw Tony and his
Tony.
wife and one daughter, yep.
Megan, Tony.
Yep.
Okay.
I know last year Jack and I went, I think, and you were there last year too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sat in the front. It was a good
Yeah,
spot.
Jack
It
was
very
there
good.
last year.
Yeah. I know legislature is like. So,
We started.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for those here for attending the curriculum committee meeting. We're in the board room and it's June 13th, just after 3:30, it's 3:35. We've got a pretty data dense meeting today, so there's going to be a lot of information that Angela's going to share. This is being live streamed or can be referred back to as well, which is helpful. And so we'll call the meeting to order. I guess it would be appropriate to just say who's here around the room. I'll start.
Diane Potter.
Megan Carlson.
Alyssa Tracy,
Jeff Hanley.
and from the district.
Angela Hardy.
And Terry's hiding in the background as usual.
Terry McGuire.
Thank you, Terry. All right, I'm gonna let Angela start us off, but we've got, it only looks like 4 items, but there's a lot of data behind all of these. We met, since my raising of hands saying I'd be happy to chair this committee, we met and we were able to just get some bearings, and we won't meet again through the summer, so we'll probably meet again in September, but unless something comes up. But we've got a lot of information on testing and state benchmarks and all kinds of things. So I'll let Angela start us with that.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Yeah.
So the first request, I'm going to share my screen. Probably going to share my screen a lot today, actually. So I should get good at this.
Is there any way to share your screen onto our screens?
I will make it, I don't know how to do that, but I'll make it really big and I'll talk you through it. Mostly I'm sharing the screen just so you have a sense of where this is and how to find it. I can show you how to find it
That was
online.
gonna be one of my questions.
Yeah, because people usually want to know that.
I need to know how to look things up.
Yep, that is fine. Let me just get this big and then I'll walk you through it.
The other way you can do it, Jeff, if you actually go to MSAD11 and watch the live stream, you'd be able to see it on there and then you could pull it up on your computer. If she's sharing something, you can't see it here. That's an alternative, just, yeah.
So this is the program of studies for next year. So this is not yet published. It's been approved by you, the board, the full board
Yeah.
and this committee. this current year's program of studies is on the website. There's not a lot different. So if someone's watching, or Jeff, if you go to MSAD11.org and you go to the high school, so it says like schools and you click high school. And then you click explore documents, you will find the program of studies online.
Okay,
We're not gonna go through the whole program of studies today, because we've already done that. We usually do that around like January or February for the coming year.
right.
But today it's being brought up because there's one requested amendment, change, or addition, actually, to the program of studies that just sort of it missed us when we did the work in January. So the modification is in English, so I'll scroll to English just so you can see where it would lie. And in the program of studies, we outline all of our course offerings, and each course offering provides how long the course is, the number of credits, if there's any prerequisites, and the description of the course. And then if there's changes year to year, we highlight those changes so that the board, this committee first goes through and reviews those changes and accepts them or not. And then the full board kind of agrees to the program of studies or not. And that was all done. There's some minor changes in English. But what you'll see here is like we have English 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for each year of high school, kids have to take English each year of high school. But then they can kind of mix it up. They can take like these co-taught, so it's a little bit, it's taught with a special ed teacher and a regular ed teacher. They can take honors versions, that sort of thing. But what we also have, I have to scroll to find it, is we have some advanced placement courses and college courses, and those supplant the grade level English class where approved. So advanced placement language and composition, students tend to take that in their junior year, typically, if they want to take that course. They don't have to take it their junior year, but that's sort of one of the recommendations if they're going to. And we've looked at the course description for language and composition and made sure there's some alignment with other English courses that students would take if they didn't take language and composition. The other option that we have for advanced placement is literature, which shows up a little further down here. And a lot of times students take advanced placement literature, these are the college courses right here, their senior year in this district. Other districts flip it and go the other way around. It doesn't matter so much, except for we've learned that if they take language their junior year, they're better prepared for the SAT. And if they want to go to a college that has an SAT requirement, we sort of try to help prep students for that. What we'd like to be able to offer, and that we've been offering in a trial period as an elective, but now we'd like to move it from elective status into an opportunity for the core. And that's AP seminar. So let me show you what that is. I think I can do it this way. Yep, and make it bigger. So we have a research element in all of our courses, English courses. And what this is it allows a student in any year of English, preferably sophomore and up, so that they've been in the high school, to take AP seminar in lieu of one of the 1, 2, 3, or 4. And it really focuses on research, collaboration, and communication. So it's a heavy dose of research skills, but it's not isolated independent research. There's independent research and then there's collaborative research. So they have to learn how to work together as a group, engage equally, take on significant roles with the work, and they also have to present. And part of their advanced placement credit, not course credit, but to earn their advanced placement number, score that could get them a waiver in college, they actually have to present and be recorded and submit that or present it live. And it's pretty rigorous. We've had solid group of students for the past 2 years take it as an elective. I personally did the crosswalk with English 10. And then I saw that it could actually apply to any grade level, but I would prefer 10, 11, or 12. And here's more specific information. And so that's the only, we'd like to move it from elective status into a core opportunity. The school counselors are in support of it. That matters because they do a lot of that credit alignment, making sure students are meeting their graduation requirements.
So it still wouldn't be required, it would just be an
Right.
option.
Yeah, it's an option, except for instead of earning their elective credits, they can use it to earn an English credit.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's not too much of a difference. And we do have student interest still for next year for this to have it. They've signed up as an elective, but they'd like to have it count as an English class. So any questions?
So it would be one of their 4 years and it's heavy on learning how to research and
Yep, so it'll do the
critical thinking.
writing, research, collaboration, critical thinking, communication, the speaking and listening standard.
Sounds good.
It's a solid class. It's pretty rigorous.
That's good to introduce in high school, the presenting. I feel like, yeah, it's good sooner.
Especially too for kids who have been doing more at lower grades. So they
Yeah.
have something.
Yeah.
Substantial to kind of dig into.
So do you need an approval from us?
Yes, on this one, we're
Okay.
going to use this level because it's a pretty minor change, but I would like to be able to document it.
So I'll move the motion that we approve the program of studies modification as requested.
I'll second the motion.
Awesome. Thank you for the explanation.
And all in favor? Or who's in favor?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no
Great.
worries.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing that screen.
While you do that, Angela, I will, because Jeff made me think of it, because I went to look up the alphabet soup as well. So ESEA, which is our next item, or third item on the agenda here, is one of the federal programs that comes right down through the state Maine Department of Education. So there's a website that covers all these titles that are listed here. It's pretty easy to follow and read through. We can put that in the notes, the link to it so you can find it. And then as we get into the subsequent bullet is around like the data dashboard and things like that, so.
Okay, yes, and I sort of merged them into the same presentation, but
good.
in order, just to make it easier. So every year we get to do this in June. So this is one of the routines of this committee. We try to shake it up by having staff come in and do some work with us. So we're not always just looking at data and just thinking about it in terms of numbers rather than real live human beings and students. So every June, we come together as a committee and I provide you information about our progress towards our district goals, about our federal funding status, how we anticipate using those funds, and it's an opportunity for you to ask questions and provide some feedback before we apply to the state. So every year, I need to apply to the state for access to our federal funds. And then the state has to review the very lengthy application and approve it, hopefully. And then at that point, we get access. And then every year at this time, over the summer, I then have to submit a performance report about our year. So I sort of bind this together for you. The performance report and the application are very lengthy and very detailed. I did not include every detail here today, but if there's something that comes up that you'd like to know more about, I will follow up with that. Okay, there we go. So just because I don't want to assume everyone understands what this process is, ESEA provides us access to titles 1, 2, 4, and 5 funds. We don't qualify for Title III funds because we do not have enough multilingual learners in our district. We do have some.
No, I didn't hear you.
Multilingual learners, so students who speak another language as their first language.
Okay.
So ESEA stands for the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and it was signed into federal law in 1965. And then it's been reapproved, reauthorized many times. One time it was reauthorized called No Child Left Behind. I think that was one of the Bush eras. And then more recently in 2015, it was reauthorized, and they call the reauthorization ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. But basically what it does is reauthorize the Elementary Secondary Education Act. And what that does is ties federal funding to student accountability measures to ensure that struggling students in particular, however defined, are achieving and are basically learning and growing like anyone else. That's the gist of it. In order to qualify for these, the application requires that the district engages in a practice that most districts do anyway. And that's, you look at your data with a team of people, you identify your strengths and challenges, you set district and school goals, you develop action plans, and you actively monitor those every year, short-term and long-term, okay? So we do all that. The measures the state requires us to really close in on is achievement, student achievement in literacy and math. They provide us measures in science, but it's not part of this ESEA accountability feature. Student growth, so if they're not achieving but they're having high growth, means they started really low but they made a lot of growth, that's measured. Attendance, behavior at the more local level, and graduation rate for the high school. So the district and building teams, we have, our district team is predominantly our administrative team. And I consider this part of it in a way, like, because we are constantly going back and forth throughout the year around this. However, we do have school-based teams, and members of the school-based team do come together 2 or 3 times a year to meet with me. So that we try to have lots of layers of the system. School-based teams are administration, classroom teachers, interventionists, sometimes coaches, and oftentimes there's parent and community included. If it's a brand new principal, sometimes it's the second year that we get the parent and community because they're really trying to learn who's who and get everyone involved. We call that process the comprehensive needs assessment because that's what the state calls it. And I don't want to have our own name and then confuse people when I ask them for their comprehensive needs assessment. It's all highly documented. Everything has to be documented at the local level and shared with me, and then I take all that and put it together at the district level, and then we review all that collectively. So recently, we kind of reestablished our long-term and short-term goals. We may have been a little bit ambitious, and we'll revisit that this summer, but the long-term are there. So spring of 2025, that we would have a significant rate of proficiency based on the measures that we use. NUEA is called Northwest Evaluation Association. It's an online adaptive test. The state requires it. We all use it.
I don't want to.
It's okay. You can interrupt anytime.
Hold you up. The goals that you set, do we get to select that level? Or does the state have a suggestion? Or does the federal government have a limit or suggestion?
It's a really,
How do you set
that's
these
a
goals?
really good question. So the federal government requires the state to monitor achievement and growth of students in all kinds of categories.
Right.
All students, then they do white students because Maine doesn't have very many students of color. And so then they figure out what the discrepancy is between all and white. And then they do students of disability. And we look at that subgroup. And then the other subgroup is the economically disadvantaged. So students who qualify.
These goals, like the numbers you did, do we select that, say, we're going to set our goal and try to meet it?
The answer
Or
is,
does the
is
state
sort
say
of
you should
yes.
get to here?
well, So the federal government provides the categories.
Right.
Then the state goes in and they monitor us. And they don't say you have to meet X until they have a consistent data set, and then they do set some measures.
Okay, so,
And that's what I'm gonna show you at the end. The challenge we're having, which is why it's a complicated answer, is the state has changed the state test and therefore the metric multiple times in the last few years. And so it's unclear to a lot of us what the exact metric is that they're using. Although we just got some feedback recently, so I'm hoping moving forward, that's gonna become a lot clearer. And then we can adjust these over the summer based on our current data and what we're seeing coming from the state. So that's why I can't answer it super
they're
clearly.
looking over your shoulder, is what you're
Yeah, we're
saying.
supposed to be able to set our own realistic goals, but the point is to get to a certain level that we're still trying to figure out exactly what
You're
that
making
is.
a stew and they're looking over you. You need more salt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see how that ties together by the end with the accountability. The accountability system has been on pause for a few years because of COVID and a waiver. And now it's just coming alive. And so we're all like, what?
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm not as clear as I
And I don't
usually
mean to
am.
hold your presentation up,
It's,
so.
no,
Okay.
these are good questions. They should be asked. If you're wondering, other people are wondering.
Yeah.
So, so then we set short-term goals, a 50 and a 60% benchmark. We used our tool, which is the state assessment. Except for in K to 5, because the state changed assessment halfway through the year. We use something that we use that also is nationally normed, and we use it routinely, and it's called iReady Math Diagnostic.
Yeah.
And so it has the same analysis behind it, so we feel really secure in that tool. So how did we do? So our district goal was to be 50% of our students being proficient, meeting or exceeding the mark based on a national norm. And we assess fall, winter, and spring, except for at high school. We don't do the winter because of the semester break. They're doing final midterm exams. So where you see the green boxes, that is where we've hit the mark. So kindergarten, first grade, and fourth grade across the district. Now, that does not mean, like, second grade's at 47%. Some of the second grade classrooms hit 50% or higher, and some didn't, and this is an average of all of them, right? So that's what gets a little skewed, but at a meeting like this, I do district level data rather than classroom level data, right? Because then that gets into a teacher, and I don't go to the teacher level here. The state checks on achievement, which is the spring 2023 column, and growth, which is the next column over. We're super proud of kindergarten. They hit 79%, which is almost our 2025 benchmark. 60% of our students met their growth goal. So there's a algorithm basically that says if you start here in a year, you should be able to make this much growth. So no matter, and it depends on where the student starts, how much growth they should be expected to make. And then there's one called a stretch goal. So 60% of our students in kindergarten met that typical growth goal. That's obviously pretty high. Would you love to have more? Yes, absolutely. And so we'll kind of look at that. And 73%, almost 3/4 of our students improved their placement. So there's 5 measures. It's kind of like does not meet, meets, exceeds, that sort of, but there's 5 levels. So they would move from one placement to another up. So at least once, so that's good. And even in second grade where they didn't meet the 50% mark, they went from 23% in the winter to 47% in the spring. Or they went from fall 4% being proficient in second grade to 47% being proficient in the spring, with a 70% of the students meeting their growth goal. So they just started really low, but they made tons of gains, more than usual in second grade.
Over all the subjects?
No, this one's just in,
This new
I
year.
didn't mark it. Oh my gosh, this one's just in math.
No, just in math, okay.
That's so funny. I always do. Anyway, this one's math. I'll clarify it before it goes back out.
Sure.
And then you can see that it's hitting a plateau in middle school and high school. So we've got to kind of work on that, although there is growth. But so for our district average is 42%. So we did not hit the 50% mark, but we got close. And then I always like to know, are we improving? So in this case, kindergarten, different kids each year in kindergarten. It's mostly the same staff, but not entirely. So in 21, 50, we're coming out of COVID here. Kindergarten didn't have as much of an impact that way, but 55% did in 2021, 69% met their proficiency level in 2022, and 79% in 2023. It's all right. Something looks off there. I might have been, anyway, so what you can see is in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and eighth grade, every one of those grade levels, they improved from the previous year. Different kids, but improved. So 64% of our grade levels are showing improvement year over year.
Again, is this math?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then I like to see, well, what does it mean by cohort, right? So it's a stable group of students, but then they're going over time. So then I look that way. So this is math. Are they growing over time? Well, we don't know that information in kindergarten because we don't have them before kindergarten, or we don't use this test in pre-K. And in grade 1, these students wouldn't have, right? They were in kindergarten in spring 2022. So that's where that 69% comes from. And then they hit 53% in spring 2023 on average. But you can see, like, if you go to grade 5, right above the black line, when they were in grade 3, that cohort was 38% proficient. Then last year they were 42% proficient. And then this year they were 47% proficient. So that cohort is improving incrementally over time. It's kind of fun, like 8th grade went from 29 to 34%. My reports, they're changing reports in NUIA, so I couldn't pull their 2021 data easily. And 10th grade, there's a 5% improvement with that cohort. In other grades, it's not a significant drop, except for first grade, and that is, there's an anomaly in that particular data set. So they're stable, and what we need to see is increased proficiency. So we need to do some work in this 6 through 10 space for sure.
And would you say like K to 5 is really like core learning and facts or something? Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like,
Yeah, it increases in complexity for sure.
Okay.
As you get older.
Yeah.
And if you missed some core learning during COVID, then that complexity is too challenging.
That's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, exactly.
That everything reflects a missing year or two.
Yeah. So that's, what are we going to do about this? So this information, plus some updated information that the schools will be providing me in another week, or a few days, I guess, is sort of what we'll use to help make those action plans. So the check marks are thing we've already started. So remember, we had an absence in grades 4 to 8 for math coaching. So we stretched Lindsay really thin as our one math coach in pre-K to 5 this year. And we did not provide a coach in middle school. And that was very upsetting to them. And we hired Maine Math and Science Alliance to provide some support, but it's not that daily coaching practice that you get in the classroom every day with kids. So we have already hired, well, I guess not until Thursday night. There's someone's name that's going on to the board on Thursday night for hiring. Yeah, and so we can fill that gap. We learned that because of lots of factors, but one of them being COVID, we do have some students in grades 6 through 12 that are more than 3 years below their grade level in math. That's making it really hard for them to be in regular classrooms, even though that's what we believe in. And so temporarily, we're redesigning core math instruction. It will still be core math, but it'll start them where they're at and accelerate them more quickly without all the distractions of other stuff.
What percentage of students are in that group, you know?
Percentage, probably 10%, 7 to 10%, depending on the grade level.
So they'll stay in their own classroom, but different things are being done for them?
Yeah, different, we're gonna use a different starting point. And then we're gonna start basically where their holes are and move them
Yeah.
up. And then they're doing a double dip. Then they're also going to get targeted interventions. So they'll have a core class with peers and then targeted interventions in small groups. And we hope that will accelerate their progress and get them to be more ready for by the time they go to high school. So we're gonna do that in multiple spaces. You approved and we've purchased a targeted math intervention curriculum that we haven't had before. So that training's been going on and we've started practicing implementation, and that will be full scale next year. We're starting to set benchmark expectations by term and grade level with teachers, so that we can all get on the same page about making sure, okay, this is the curriculum and this is the scope and sequence and these are the instructional resources, but what are we really hoping most of our students will get to in terms of a metric? Just to help us gauge and reflect and see where we need to lean in a little more. We know in grades 3 through 6, there's some core foundational knowledge and skills that we need to build out. Some of it's just we've had staff turnover in those grades, and it's just they missed a lot of our core training that we had a few years ago. So we're gonna lean in there. And the high school team's gonna work with me. They want to kind of reconsider the orientation of their math credits with the timing of them, how to add more applied math in, so that it's more relevant and engaging for students, and kind of review that scope and sequence for them. We think that can help also. I'm sure there'll be a few other suggestions that come out of that end of year reflection that schools are doing right now.
And this is what you'll report for what the short-term goal is, right? 'Cause-
Yeah, so all this stuff will get put into whatever the
Yeah.
state's format is online, and I'll type in all the pieces.
Because since the younger grades did so well, there's not necessarily a need for them to have an item in this list because they
Well,
met or.
Yeah, I mean, they'll have certain
They
things.
will, I'm sure,
And
but,
the math intervention curriculum actually goes all the way down to
oh, there you go,
kindergarten.
very good, yep.
Which is where one of our big spots is.
Mhm.
And at certain buildings, we know there are certain practices we need to lean in differently than other buildings. And that's why each building develops an action plan, so it's more specific. And then we say, okay, so where do we need the coaches to be more often as a result of those plans?
Very good.
Do the kids that go to the Cable Area Technical Center in grades 11 and 12, I think, I mean, is it hard to get everything in that they need? Because
Depends on the student. I mean, usually they plan for it and they work with their school counselor on, that's something they want to be able to do, and they know they'll miss the last half of every day for that. And so there's blocks of time in the morning, and we plan in advance their schedule around that usually. They're pretty motivated to go to that program.
Right.
Yeah.
So in literacy, we had high hopes at 60%. Rather than 50%, but we did not make it in any, we did maybe in certain spaces, but collectively on average across the grade level, we did not meet that mark anywhere this spring. It's also indicative of a couple things. One, we've been leaning into math professional learning a lot longer than literacy in this district. And I think COVID really impacted a lot of our foundational literacy work. A lot of parents don't know how to teach children how to read. They're happy to practice with their children, and that's fair. They didn't go to school for it, and it's very complicated. And it seems like it should be something so natural, and it really isn't. So that's disappointing, but I did mark grade 3 as yellow because if we had 50% as our mark, they would have hit 50%. And I find that really interesting because grade 3 is usually a low point for us. It changes, a lot of the expectations go from learning how to read to making meaning of your reading in 3rd grade, including on the test. And our students actually hit a 51% mark, which was surprising. They're usually much lower at that level. And you can see even, that's their growth goal. I mean, and then they hit the 40%, they hit the 40% mark on their proficiency, but that 51% means there was significant growth to get to that level, and it's just unusual. But our district average is only 39%, so that's disheartening.
Mm.
Does that average change? I know it's hard to figure out with COVID in there, those years, but from maybe.
This district's sort of been in the 40% range over in the past. So it's a little bit lower, but we've been doing a little bit of work, quite a bit of work, so we were hoping it would start pushing up, but I think we just misjudged how much support some of our, both our staff and our students needed, especially like staff in grades 3 and up. If they're not typically teaching kids how to read, but how to make meaning of reading, and now all of a sudden they're being asked to also teach kids how to read, that's just new skills. And so we're teaching them on the fly so that they can make up for that, that difference that's coming in, and it's a lot, it's a lot. But is learning improving? The answer is yes. Also, 64% of our grade levels are showing improvement. Remember, this is different kids per year, but the same grade level. And in this one, I just highlighted the green didn't mean they met 50%, but that they have shown improvement. So that's exciting. I don't know why I marked grade 10. I think because I thought it was awfully close.
Yeah.
Oh no, look, this is why, because I'm reading it backwards. Spring 2022 is to the right. I did this chart differently than I did the other ones. I should have done it the other way around. So you're reading it from right to left, which we don't typically do in real life. So if you look down in grade 9 and 10, they went from 27 to 43% and from 29 to 42%. So there is a big jump. They've done a lot of work on vocabulary instruction and context this year. Reestablishing some writing. I think there's some growth. And 8th grade went up 10% too. So that's really, pretty exciting. Same in 1st grade. So there's some good stuff happening. And then if you look over time, this is that same over time thing. And I did it the same way in this one. I should always do these charts at the same time. So the cohort at 2022, so let's look at grade 2. When they were in 1st grade, they were 30% proficient. And in 2nd grade, that same group of students is 33% proficient. So there's progress. So if you read right to left, the gray to the green, then you'll see those are the grade levels where we're seeing progress. And the other grade levels, they're just very close. 37 to 38%, 40 to 38%. So they're stable. And what we want to see is an increase. So 60% of the cohorts have grown over time.
I think it'll be really interesting to see these kindergartners.
Yes.
Because I know that if I remember correctly, at a parent-teacher conference, my son's teacher telling me that they were not like other kindergartners that she'd had. So
Really?
and like the progress, like my son in particular too, and she said others in class, that it's not like that he shot up and like made this great math star. It's the amount of progress that they made from that point where they started is like crazy.
Yeah, that growth measure.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of that. And I mean, to give the teachers credit, especially kindergarten, we've made some significant changes in kindergarten in the last 5 years. We're really getting down to core literacy strategies in a more systematic way, where the foundational math skills are becoming much more clear. We're changing the timing of when we teach things because we think they work better for students' attention and memory. So the teachers are they're doing great work, and all levels are really. It's just that's one of the most significant grade levels that we've made a lot of changes in. So what are we doing to improve? Because we're going to need to. So we're going to follow that same practice that I just told you about math. If students are more than 3 grade levels below in the middle and high school, we're going to redesign that instruction until they start to get close to that benchmark. And then we're going to then there'll be they'll still be with their peers, but then they'll be with their peers in another space. So we think we can get there with that model. We're redesigning some of our positions mostly in special education to increase access to more intensive targeted literacy interventions. It's just a different model. So that's playing out. We're setting benchmark expectations as well. Specifically in the middle school, we're really we're developing a more explicit scope and sequence in grammar and writing to really make sure it builds very explicitly. And the way the English language arts standards are written is they kind of roll over one another, and they're a little bit broad, like you'll work on this writing and then you'll work on this aspect of writing, but it doesn't get into the nitty gritty. And we know that to improve, you have to be really clear about in 6th grade, we're going to work on these nitty gritty pieces, and 7th grade, these. Same with grammar, right? In 6th grade, we're going to work on these root words. In 7th grade, we're going to work on these types of endings. In 8th grade, we're going to work on this, right? And if we're really clear, then we can focus and the kids will have a much more systematic learning experience. So we're doing that. We're missing a pretty significant systematic scope and sequence for word study in grades 3 through 5. We knew that was absent in the literacy program we adopted. It's in 2. We have it in K1 too. We had another resource we've been sort of using, but we don't think it's powerful enough. And so we're kind of redefining that now and this summer, so that we can work with grade 3-5 teachers to create space for that. And they know, I mean, this is something they're seeing is needed as well. So we do a significant vocabulary study, and word study is more spelling, grammar, analysis of root words, that sort of stuff. And then we've had some great success in grade 6 with introducing oral reading fluency. Both the assessment and specific practice and strategies with kids. It's in every child but one made growth in 6th grade from beginning year to end of year using that tool. That's powerful.
Yeah.
So, because those results just started to come through. We started to introduce oral reading fluency in grades 3 through 5. So I think now that we see that it works in 6th grade, we're going to go down a little more intensively and up.
Just so I know what you mean, oral reading, the child reading out loud?
Yeah, and just as you can imagine, fluency means like with intonation, paying attention to punctuation, but also knowing what they're reading, right? So it sounds smooth. A lot of students, if they're not able to read multisyllabic words, so longer words, they get stuck and they're breaking that apart, and then they're not fluent, then they're not accurate, and then they're not understanding. And so if we can work on each of those 3 aspects, we can help a student really grow in their reading ability.
I remember as a child, we had a teacher that used to read to us.
Yes, we still do
Every
that.
Friday, she read a chapter in a book to us.
And
And you learn, by listening to her, you
yeah,
learn what it means to read smoothly.
exactly. It's great modeling.
And it was a wonderful, I've never forgotten it.
Oh,
Mrs.
some of those, what was her name?
Mrs. Schlossberg.
Some of the stories are
She
really
got
powerful.
lost on a
too.
mountain in Maine to us, I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
And it was just a great story.
I-
And she read others too, you know.
I think I've heard other people talking about
Yeah.
Mrs.
But
Osborne.
That's
Uh-huh.
funny.
You know, the whole classroom listened. You didn't have to tell anyone to be, they all wanted to hear the story. But it made you realize when you're reading something, that's how it should sound. That's how the tone should be. And like I say, it's just, I needed, all right, I've talked.
Yeah, no, well,
We
and
need to go.
so modeling and showing that is super important, and I think we do that really well here. One of the things that I think that what the teachers are saying we're working on is how to create time and space for students to practice that. And especially because we have a fair number of students who aren't doing a lot of reading at home, so they're not getting the internal fluency either. And so we just are trying to make sure there's time for students to be reading and to be heard reading and to hear themselves reading.
Yeah, so I was saying to Angela today at Pittston School, they had a poetry reading for 2nd grade. And my son said, we're each gonna have a chair. And I was like, okay. But they were all kind of spread out. So we could go to our student, but then we could go to all the other students. And you could either see if they wanted to read the whole book, just one thing. And it was interesting to see some of them are quiet and barely, and others were so proud to speak loudly and they knew exactly what they were saying as they were reading it. So it was really neat. Yeah.
So, yeah, so that one's the one that you can probably picture what we're trying to get to from that, right?
Yep.
So those are some of the things, and then with the building action plans, we'll have a little more. So those are that's our data point. That's like the big, where are we at? In math, we hit the 50% mark in a fair number of spaces. We have room to grow. In literacy, we did not hit the 60% mark anywhere. We came close in 50%, and so we are, we're gonna need to continue to do a little bit more work to really see that growth. What's fun though, is that when you start looking at individual students in individual classrooms, there are places where those marks are being met. And there's lots of growth, which means students were starting low and getting high. They just didn't get high enough to meet the achievement mark, the proficiency mark. So that's why the growth measure is really important. So you have classroom teachers that we fund locally, for the most part. And then we have this federal funding from the Elementary Secondary Education Act. And we get Titles 1, 2, and 4 through sort of the economically disadvantaged process, which is in the past has been filling out the free and reduced lunch applications, submitting those, and then the state uses that data to calculate how they're going to split up the pool of money that they get from the federal government across the state. Just this year, they've changed the calculator, basically, because so many schools are saying, we're not getting the return rate on those free and reduced lunch forms that we used to. So there's something.
I'm so glad they heard us.
Yeah, there's something else called a direct certification rate. And basically, those are families who are in the most need, who have access to state resources, and sort of that they're already being funneled through another source. So foster children or families who are accessing certain types of resources. Honestly, I don't know enough about direct cert. I'd have to ask my food service person, Linda Sargent. But the state understands that number, gets that number, and they can provide a direct cert rate to each school without me knowing the individuals.
Good, yeah.
Okay?
That makes
So
sense.
each school gets a direct cert rate, and then that calculates what your district rate is. And then, because more than likely you have more families in your district who are economically disadvantaged than those who are receiving those direct certification supports, they multiply that rate by 0.4. So that gets you a higher number. Then they figure out how to disperse the big pool of money that comes from the federal government across the street by that direct cert multiplier. Does that make any sense?
Yes, where does the 0.4 come from?
It's a federal, it's in some federal documentation,
I'm sure
that's the
somebody thought it was a good
qualifier.
one.
I have no idea.
They come up with a number.
Yeah.
that-
Some statistician somewhere.
Okay.
And it's constant, it's the number, so it's that times 0.4. So that is new to us this year, so we had to do some calculations to figure out how that would play out. Now, Title V is determined through federal rural designations, and there's two types, and we fall under one type and not under the other type. And then they calculate our funding from that. I don't know that I can tell you much more about that other than then I get my funding.
Yeah, right.
So here's our kind of funding allocation, just so you have a sense of what this looks like. So this year is fiscal year 23. And then obviously next school year is fiscal year 24. Because they changed the process by which they split up the pool of money, the direct cert stuff. Instead of getting our preliminary allocation in January when we do the budget, we got our preliminary allocation on March 20th. So it's just later than usual. And then the difference is we got a little more money in Title I and Title IV, and a little less money in Title II and Title V. But overall, we had a net gain, which was unexpected. So that was appreciated. It's a temporary net gain. There's a piece of Title I that gave us a little extra this year that we won't normally get. I can't really remember why. The staffing costs for fiscal year 24 are not exactly accurate yet because people in the spring, they can change factors and we change some hiring, like some people leave and some people come. So this is as accurate as I could get at this point in time. And before June is out, usually by next week, Andrea and I spend some time on this and we update that staffing cost column. And then I'm required by law, if we spend more than $500,000 in Title I, which we do, then I have to take 1% of that allocation and reserve it for what we call family engagement strategies in our Title I schools. So that's what that $5,000 is. And then I come up with how much is left over, which is usually zero. And so it says 57,000. It will be less than that, I will guarantee it, once all this benefits especially are in, the adjustments in salaries have been made. That'll go down. It's not enough for me to hire another person, which is all of that funding is just staffing, which I'll show you what that looks like. So what we usually do is we reserve some of this funding. Oh, I forgot to explain something. Well, we reserve some of this funding for professional development because while we have a professional development line in the local curriculum budget, it's never enough. And because it's state money, don't worry, there's goals and there's accountability and we're accounted to every dollar and every project and every metric is accounted for. I am anticipating that we will need to reserve some of these funds for some professional learning around civil rights and mostly that. I don't know for sure. I have to wait for the board to do their work and wait and see how that plays out. But usually there's something that comes up that needs to be taken care of, and it's usually professional development, I will say, is really costly. It's really important, but it's costly. And so I try to leave a set of funds so that I can write a goal and a plan over the summer based on what's coming up in the month of June. We are going to do a big training around managing anxiety, but that we got funded through the United Way, which would have come out of here if we didn't. And the only other thing I forgot to tell you, I know, I'm sorry, this is like soup. Title II, the staffing I'll go through all of them. Title I, that's all math and literacy interventionists, K-5 only. And not at Helen Thompson because they don't qualify for Title I based on their economically disadvantaged status. They don't have enough students. They're below 40% for 3 years in a row. Now 4 years in a row. So all of that money has to go towards the other 3 elementary schools.
Yeah.
Title II, that salary is what we call class size reduction. So it's teacher benefits plus, because it's federal money, we have to pay extra to main PERS. So it's not what we would normally plan under our local budget. We have to spend this extra percentage that goes to the retirement system because we accessed federal funds to pay for the salary and benefits. So that we look at where our data is saying, so for example, in Riverview, we have 4 teachers in 3rd grade this year. Next year, we're going to move have 4 teachers in 4th grade instead of 3 and move 3rd grade back to 3 teachers. And as a result, the class size reduction teacher will be whoever's that 4th teacher, right? We're using it to make the class size smaller, not use the local budget, and hopefully increase student achievement and growth as a result. So that's how that's measured. Title IV, we move all the money out of Title IV. And we put it in Title V and Title I. And the reason for that is Title IV has lots and lots of rules. And it's really hard for a district our size with the amount of money that's allocated, to follow all the rules, so you can move money.
So you have the flexibility to move that?
I can't move money out of Title I. I can only move money into Title I. But I can move all my money out of Title IV. I can put all money, Title II, IV, and V, into Title V, which is the most flexible, and do whatever we all decide. But Title II has always been, we've always needed professional development funding, so we keep it there. And then we often have appreciated having that staff member to keep their class sizes more manageable so that we can work on this achievement issue we have going on. So we haven't moved money out. Title V, what we use it for is for an interventionist at Helen Thompson, where we can't use the other
Title I.
federal money for it.
Yeah.
Because that's rural designation, not economically disadvantaged designation. So I'm allowed to use Title V at Helen Thompson, and that means we can pay for a math interventionist there using Title V and not use local funding. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like on the website, they've got a good way that you can navigate what's allowed and what isn't, to
Yes,
your
there's
point.
tons of rules.
So that's good, okay.
So does that make sense, kind of how this is going? So there's no fluff, there's no special projects really besides professional development, it's all salaries and staff, so it doesn't hit the local budget.
Right.
The Title I is the only one you can't move money out of, right?
Right, I can't move money out, I have to use it. And so because like, if you look back at this, like we were allocated in fiscal year 23, 448,000. So I wouldn't need 4,000 for family engagement. I wouldn't need 1% because it was under 500,000. We may reserve some money, but not $4,000 worth. But we usually move money from Title II into Title I.
So it puts it
So
over.
it moved it over 500, so I still had to do that
I was gonna say, is
reservation.
that makes you hit the trigger, right? Okay.
Yep,
Mhm.
because I had asked, is it the original allocation or is it the money you end up with in the pot? And it's the money you end up with.
Gotcha.
So then, just so you're aware, this is where we put the money. So LER, Riverview, and Pittston Randolph qualify for Title I funding. We have their populations. This is a general calculation. If out of the students, 15 to 20% of students are usually, we ultimately want to get to 10 to 15% of our students being provided services in Title I. But because we still feel like we have this impact right now from COVID, these are estimates. I do have anticipated that some of those were too rough, so I didn't put them in because it's a board meeting and in public, and I decided I'd rather not be called out on it. But in Riverview, like, for example, I know we have about 34 students anticipated for math and 34 other students anticipated for literacy. And we try to keep a 25-to-1 staff member ratio, which makes it challenging. But this is where the salary is going. So at LER, we have 2 ed techs in literacy and 2 in math. And at Riverview, we have 1 in math, and I had this question mark, because I'm like, is there any way we can figure out how to use some of that reserve money to pay for half in ed tech or redirect someone? That is not resolved yet until Andrea can finish the final calculations. In literacy, we have a teacher, and we have, we're redirecting part of a teacher's time here. And then in Pittston, 1 ed tech in each. These are highly trained individuals, just to be clear. So they get tens of hours of training every year, and they come in really well prepared, and they have a very structured routine that they work on with students based on the students' data. And then our non-Title I schools, Helen Thompson and the middle school, were required to provide equitable services. So because we receive federal funding, then they say, you can't just not have services at Helen Thompson because you don't get any money. You have to have services. If you're offering the services at the economically disadvantaged schools, you have to offer them at the other schools. And therefore your local money or some other source has to pay for them. So how we do that at Helen Thompson is we use the Title V money for math, and we use local money for literacy. And at the middle school, historically, we've always used local money. And then at the I didn't add the high school because I don't know why, because our program's a little different at the high school, but there is intervention, it's the Learning Lab, and we do have a teacher, 1 full-time ed tech and 1 half-time ed tech. So does that sort of give you a picture of where all the dollars are going?
Yeah, I mean, this
Okay.
lays out the federal money directly to these programs and to these roles when we talk about that, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that's ESEA. That's like what we review this again one more time, but with a little different lens, one other time in the year. You can always ask questions. This part I want to be quick because this is just an overview. But if you have questions, I'd like to revisit it in the fall, but late fall, and I'll explain why. So Jeff was asking about who sets the measures, and that's where I said it was complicated. So just recently, the state has sort of reestablished their accountability system, and they call it tiers of support. And we all got a surprise letter. So Riverview and Gardner Area High School are considered tier 1 status, and you see that's the blue one at the bottom. That's basically, you have some categories that we monitor that are low from not from this school year, from the school year before. And we get a pretty little report, and it gives us check marks about where we're good and circles, red circles about where we need to improve. Okay, and I'll explain that. And so we're kind of on notice, that's what that means. And if the state offers professional development, we can go for free, okay? Riverview is in the same boat. Pittston Randolph, because of their 21-22 data, actually moved to tier 3 status, which is the top of the pyramid, the most level of support. Now remember, this is from 21-22, not this school year. So this school year's data hasn't been looked at by the state. And it's only in systems where there's Title I, and they are looking at chronic absenteeism, academic progress, that's the growth measure, academic achievement, both in math and literacy, and for the high school graduation rates. So those are the measures they're kind of categorizing that they got approved by the federal government to be monitoring. This you're gonna have a hard time seeing, but it's the colors I want you to see. Our schools are listed top to bottom, high school down to elementary schools on the left. Chronic, and this is all on the website, I can show you where on the state website. Chronic absenteeism is the red all the way down, and that means emerging. And I want to give a little context for that. You are chronically absent if you miss more than 10% of the school year, which is 18 days. Okay, so if you miss more than 18 days, you're considered chronically absent. 21-22, we still had COVID protocols in place.
Right.
If a student tested positive, they were required to be out of school for 5 days. Many of our students tested positive more than once. So they could have been out for 10 days, 15 days, a sibling got it, so they stayed home for 10 days instead of 5 days. So getting to that 18 days mark was really easy for a lot of our kids. So every single school ended up in emerging that year. Historically, we haven't always been this high. We haven't been in the red zone for a lot of our schools, just so you have some context. And then you can see orange is the next one up. Meeting is the turquoise color, and excelling is the purple color. So the middle school in math is considered excelling in their achievement. But do you remember? Our students this year were getting 30-something% proficient. So that's fascinating. So there's just like, we're just trying to figure it out. So what I also want to be clear about is like the high school, most of where their English achievement is developing, math achievement is developing. Their graduation rate is emerging. They're off by like 0.5% from the state's target to our data. It's like not even a student, right? So one student.
So it's math rounding almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not like they have far to go. Whereas Pittston, in some categories, they're off 10%, which still, given Pittston's size, is like 3 students. Okay, so if we can make a difference in the lives of these students, we can also make a difference in our state accountability system. It's not like all of our students are not doing well. It's that based on the categories, we're not. Yeah, so here's just a little bit closer look. There's the emerging. The reports we get at the school level are more detailed than this. But I wanna, like Helen Thompson there says they're meeting in academic math achievement. This is from 21-22. So then they outline the tiers of support. So I told you tier 1 is just professional development and you're kind of on notice. It means 1 or more student populations experience challenges across all the indicators. So for example, Students with disabilities might not meet the state expectation in achievement in math, growth math, achievement, literacy, and growth literacy. Does that make sense? And so therefore, and obviously chronic absenteeism. And so then that group puts a school on tier 1 support. And that's okay, it means we need to focus in, right? And work on that. Tier 3 is when all the student populations are experiencing challenges across all the indicators. So what's gonna happen is they'll get additional supports from the state. I already told you about the subgroups, those are the ones in gray. So this is kind of the way the report looks. It's another way to look at this report, which I'll hand around so you can see it, but this is the high school version. The top row is chronic absenteeism. And what that means is all students, we had 33% of students being chronically absent. Well, remember, we had a lot of kids out for COVID. And the line is the 10% mark. The economically disadvantaged students at that particular school, 51% of them were out a lot. 46% of students with disabilities were out a lot. 33% of white students were out a lot, which is slightly different than the all students, but barely. So that's district-wide, and we've been working on that a lot this year. So I'm waiting to see what this year's data looks like. But if you look at academic progress for their growth score, students with disabilities hit the 96% mark on meeting their growth. They needed to hit the 100% mark to turn from red to blue.
4 points off.
So they're 4 percentage points off. It's like if one more student had met their growth score, they would have been blue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and like economically disadvantaged, we're 92% and the mark is 100%. So it's not tragic, it's something to learn from and figure out how to improve. And then under academic achievement, that Jeff, you see, it's hard to see on the screen, but I'll outline it. There's this red box over here that says all students, and it says 75% ELA academic achievement. And their target goal is 84.4%. I don't know how they came up with 84.4%, and that's what you were asking. What's the state's benchmark?
Yeah.
I don't know why it's 84.4%. I will figure it out. I will work with, I'm gonna go to some training and try to figure out how they get that measure. So for example, like students with disabilities, 44% met the academic achievement expectations, and they expect 54% to. But I don't know how that number came to be.
Maybe a simple email saying, how do you come up with it?
Yeah, well, they're setting trainings up, so I'll go and spend some time. But over here in math, the economically disadvantaged students met the mark. That's why they're blue.
Wow.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is.
So it's disappointing, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it's so close.
And we've
For the
already done
year
a
it
lot of
was.
work in a year, and
Yeah.
we don't have that updated data. And we won't have that updated data probably till like October. And so that's why I don't want to like jump into this in September. I want to wait until we see what did they say about this year when we find out in the fall, and how does that measure? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So do we, like, how long, obviously the summer is the summer, so you're able to strategize, but then are they gonna kind of clean slate the data with the next year and be like, if you're way off, COVID was COVID, or are they gonna give you any sense of that?
I
Like,
think that you have to just meet the mark.
I
And you have to
gotcha.
meet it based on their metrics. So,
Okay, but they have the data that they're not telling you where
Well-
the mark came from in a way.
I-
yeah, so this is NUIA
Yeah.
map data.
Yeah,
And so what I did is I looked at our NUIA map data
Oh,
for this year,
gotcha.
but remember the state changed the assessment in the spring to NUIA through year data, and we were doing both?
yeah,
So
So
that's why there's
that makes
especially a
sense.
delay.
Okay.
We have to wait for the state to transition to their new assessment tool
Mhm.
to then update these things. And then we'll use that all next year. So it may be a couple of years before we can really show progress because the tool's changing also.
But then do you have additional like reporting around this too?
So this is what's gonna happen.
Okay.
The school will get a leadership coach from the state.
Okay,
They will have a leadership team, which Tiffany already has.
yeah,
They'll develop a school level plan, which we already do, so they'll review it. They'll have at least one evidence-based intervention, we have many, but they'll review it and give us feedback.
Yep.
We supposedly will have access to additional federal funds at that school. We don't know what that is
what
yet.
does that mean? Yeah,
And there'll be professional development available,
nice.
and we don't know what that looks like yet.
And we don't necessarily have a timeline, that's where I'm headed, like, so how long do we get this for and how long is it so
Every year
soon?
it's reviewed,
Okay,
yeah, so,
so we're anticipating it starting in the fall.
right.
And it will go for the next school year and then we would see, but then the data may come in the middle.
So
And it may-
the data is supposed to be more efficient once they get into this new
Got it.
testing system. It's just
Yeah.
the first year of it is slow.
Yeah, makes sense, okay.
I'm not really in favor, I'm not big on comparisons except for ourselves within our own school district. However, is there anything salient of how other school districts in our area are doing?
We don't know about the other school districts in our area very easily right now because it's hard to
really
understand the
get to it.
system on the state level right now. I'm anticipating this data was released on the state ESEA data dashboard, which you're welcome to go to and you
Yeah,
can
it's
type
lovely
those
to click
words in.
through.
They released a public facing view on May 31st. I haven't heard anything since. We have our own reports. The data, the exact specifics that we get on these, I haven't seen laid out in the same way on the data warehouse, so this is more informative. So I don't know how we compare.
Well, it's interesting, but I don't think it's everything.
It's not everything.
I agree, yeah.
And
that's right.
remember, Pittston Randolph has had a change in leadership for multiple years in a row.
Yes, they have.
We have the same principal this year that we plan on having next year.
Mhm.
That's a win. There's been, a lot of, there's not really any staff turnover there for next year. There's
Right.
been a lot of good work.
Mhm.
So, that all is favorable. And then these are the things that Tiffany and I talked through. We have added a strategic literacy intervention program across the district, but also at Pittston that is being practiced now, but fully implemented next year. We've added additional foundational literacy resources for teachers in that grade 3 through 5 band that we were talking about. It's like really hard for them to do foundational literacy because they've never learned that stuff. That education, special ed math-based program, Number Worlds is going into place that you purchased. We're increasing personalized online learning time for students because we're finding the balance is proving successful for students. And we'll continue to review our data really closely to see what else we can do. So there's a lot of good stuff already in place before we even were ready to, before we even heard about this happening. And then I just like to share Tiffany's message to staff so that you know that the tone of how she's taking this out with her staff is we're great people. All progress is good. There's room for improvement. We work on this one step at a time and we can make this happen. And that's really how we feel about any of our schools.
And I think just as a personal note, just because I have a student there and I've been involved there for a while, like you just mentioned, she has really been great at learning the community in that school this year. So she's like ready for this next year. And the staff that has been there for years that already works well together, they'll just embrace this, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the initial shock was
Right,
a little
sure,
much
yeah.
because no one wants that
No,
kind of
no.
like information.
Mm.
But again, it's if we just work a few students at a time, we will be in great shape.
Yeah.
So now I have officially exhausted you. I will just very quickly show you this. I'm not gonna go through it at all, but
I know the page itself, if you go to this state website, even though it looks like it's clickable, it's a data warehouse. And if you haven't used it before, every time you click an item, it kind of refreshes. You got to give it a second as you go through it. So you just have to be a little patient.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna go through this with you because I think it's something that takes time.
Yeah.
But if you typed in accountability on the website, you'd find it, but you see here's Maine Department of Ed, assessment and accountability.
Yeah.
Data dashboard. brings you to this page, main school data. And then here are all the things you can learn about, so many things.
So many views, so many.
And
things.
so if you think about it, there's a ginormous database behind this that's basically just being read and visualized.
I've tried going into it, there's just mountains of stuff there.
There's a lot of data, yeah.
Yeah,
You really need to know what you want to look for.
what you're looking for. Yeah, so like you can look at our district and you can scroll down through all the districts. And of course, we're SU11 and then MSAD11 and you hit apply. And then you can see all the things you're looking for that they have updated.
Applying just to this district.
Just for this district, yep. So, if you click on this, and it takes a little bit to read, like the black mark is the state average. So for our 4-year measurement, we are just above the state average for graduation rate. And we're above the state average for our male graduation rate, and we're just below the state average for our female graduation rate. Which is interesting because
That is interesting.
it's not what I expected when knowing our other data. And then if we have fewer than 10 students in a category, they will not show you the data set. So that's what the gray bars are.
Yeah,
Okay?
that makes
So it
sense.
protects the students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's sort of how you do that all the way through the system. But like our graduation rate for students with disabilities is above the state average. So that's sort of just helpful information to know.
Mhm.
And if you have time, you're welcome to, at home and you're bored and you wanna just mess
All
around.
the colors and all the
You can't
things.
sleep at night?
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
you go. We're constantly looking back at this to make sure it's accurate, make sure our data that gets pulled up to the state is accurate to, like that the numbers are reading right. Every so often you find an anomaly and you have to Terry helps us advocate for change.
Any information on the bill that was going through that was going to increase the tech wages by 175%? Now it's 200%.
Yeah, you know what,
Do we know what the status of that bill
I
is?
don't know the status. I do know that more groups got involved. And it got more complicated. That's as much as I know. This time of year, I'm on a need to know basis on some of those things.
Right, unless it bubbles up to really be direct, yeah.
Yep, because there's too much on my plate.
I wish I knew you don't know the LD number then, do you?
No.
I can get that for you.
I emailed my state senator, not the representative yet.
So any questions?
I just always thank God we have you on top of this
Correct.
stuff because
Yes,
Well, anyone in my role, really. But, it's a lot. I know it's a lot to process. And we'll need to process even further than what we did, like as a team in our district, but
Mhm.
this gives you at least an overview of where we're at and how our money is used and to what end. And why we still need these people, because we have to keep working with these kids in small groups and
right.
targeted ways to help them feel successful and be successful. Okay, anything else?
No, I haven't heard of any other topics, so we'll meet again in September. If something comes up before then, we'll talk about it and put it on the agenda, but yeah.
Yeah, usually we try not to meet, the board meets in August, but we try not to meet as a committee till September unless something comes up that's necessary.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so.
Thank you so much.
we adjourned?
I think we are. Thank you. Not too
Someday,
bad.
we're gonna get done on time exactly.